The sun was setting behind the hills when Priya walked back from the well, carrying water that seemed heavier than usual. At 19, she had gotten used to people looking away when she passed by. In her small village, being different meant being invisible. And Priya was different in ways that made her feel like she didn't belong anywhere. She had always been bigger than other girls her age. While her friends got married one by one, Priya watched from the sidelines. Her mother would sigh every time another wedding invitation arrived. "When will it be our turn?" she would whisper to herself, thinking Priya couldn't hear. But Priya heard everything. She heard the whispers behind closed doors. She heard her parents talking late at night about money they didn't have. She heard her father coughing more and more each day, a cough that had started small but now shook his whole body. Their small house sat at the edge of the village, where the good farmland ended and the rocky soil began. For 3 years now, the rains had forgotten their village. The crops failed one season after another. What little they managed to grow barely fed the family, let alone paid the bills that kept piling up. Priya's father, Ravi, had been a proud man once. He had worked hard all his life, believing that honest work would always provide for his family. But honest work couldn't fight the drought. It couldn't make the rains come or the crops grow. And it definitely couldn't pay for the medicine he needed when the cough turned into something much worse. The doctor in the next town had been kind but clear. "This treatment will help, but it's expensive," he had said, writing down numbers that made Ravi's hands shake. They sold their cow first, then their goat, then the jewelry that had been in their family for generations. Still, it wasn't enough. Priya tried to help. She offered to work in other people's fields, but work was scarce when everyone was struggling. She tried to sell vegetables in the market, but who had money to buy what they could barely afford to grow? Every door she knocked on seemed to close before she could even speak. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the worry about money. The worst part was watching her parents blame themselves. Her mother, Kamala, would stare at Priya sometimes with eyes full of regret. Not regret for having her, but regret for not being able to give her the life other girls had. "If only she was," Kamala would start to say, then stop herself. But Priya knew what she meant. If only she was prettier. If only she was smaller. If only she was the kind of daughter who attracted good marriage proposals. If only she was different than who she was. The money lenders started coming to their door when Ravi couldn't work anymore. At first they were polite. "Just pay what you can," they would say. "We understand times are hard." But politeness has a way of disappearing when money doesn't appear. Soon, the visits became threats. "Pay up or lose your house." The amount they owed had grown like a monster, feeding on interest and late fees until it was bigger than anything their small family could ever hope to pay. Priya would lie awake at night, listening to her parents whisper in the next room. Her father's voice was weak from sickness, but his words were heavy with shame. "What kind of man can't provide for his family?" he would ask. Her mother would try to comfort him, but Priya could hear the fear in her voice too. One particularly bad night, when the moneylenders had been especially cruel, Priya heard her parents discussing something that made her blood run cold. They were talking about her like she was a problem that needed solving, like she was a burden that had to be lifted. "She's 19, her father said. "Most girls her age are already married with children." "But who would want—" her mother started, then stopped. "Someone will," Ravi said, his voice desperate. "Someone has to. We can't keep living like this." Priya pressed her face into her pillow and tried not to cry. She had always known she was different, but hearing it from her own parents made it real in a way that hurt more than any stranger's stare. The next morning, her father was gone before she woke up. Her mother moved around the house like a ghost, cleaning things that were already clean, cooking food no one wanted to eat. When Priya asked where he had gone, Kamala just shook her head. He came back that evening with news that changed everything. "I found someone," he announced, not looking at Priya directly. "A man from the next village. He's willing to take her." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one wanted to acknowledge. Priya felt her world tilt sideways. "Take me where?" she asked. though she already knew the answer. As his wife, her father said, still not meeting her eyes. He'll pay enough to cover our debts. The amount was so small it made Priya feel sick. $2. That's what her entire future was worth. $2 to make their problems go away. Her mother started crying then, the kind of crying that comes from deep inside where all the hurt lives. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry." But Priya didn't feel angry at them. She felt empty. Like someone had reached inside her and taken out everything that made her who she was, leaving behind only the parts that other people found useful. She looked around the small house that had been her whole world. At the corner where she used to sit and dream about a different life. At the window where she would watch other girls her age laugh and play, wishing she could be part of their world. At the door that would soon close behind her forever, the man was supposed to come for her in 3 days. 3 days to say goodbye to the only life she had ever known. 3 days to prepare for a future she had never chosen and didn't want. That night, she sat outside under the stars and thought about all the dreams she had never dared to speak out loud. Dreams of learning to read properly. Dreams of traveling to the big city she had only heard about in stories. Dreams of finding someone who would love her not despite who she was, but because of who she was. But dreams don't pay debts. Dreams don't cure sickness. Dreams don't feed families or keep roofs over heads. As she sat there in the darkness, Priya made a decision that surprised even her. She wouldn't fight this. She wouldn't run away or make it harder for her parents than it already was. If her sacrifice could save her family, then maybe her life had some purpose after all. She went inside and started packing her few belongings into a small bag. A dress her mother had made her. A book she couldn't read well but kept anyway, a small mirror that showed her a face she had never learned to love. Tomorrow she would start counting down the days until her old life ended and her new one began. She didn't know what that new life would look like, but she knew it couldn't be worse than feeling worthless in the place where she was supposed to belong. At least, that's what she told herself as she tried to fall asleep on what might be one of her last nights in the only home she had ever known. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change. Whether that change would bring hope or heartbreak remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. In 3 days, Priya's life would never be the same again. The third day arrived too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Priya had barely slept, and when she did, she dreamed of running through fields that never ended, always running but never getting anywhere safe. Her mother had been cooking since dawn, making all of Priya's favorite foods as if a good meal could somehow make up for what was about to happen. The smell of fresh bread and spiced vegetables filled the small house, but nobody seemed hungry. Priya sat by the window, watching the road that led to their village. Soon a stranger would walk down that road and take her away forever. She tried to imagine what he looked like, this man who had bought her future for the price of a cup of tea in the city. Her father paced back and forth, checking and rechecking the papers the moneylenders had given him. "This will clear everything," he kept saying to himself. "After today, we'll be free of debt." But his voice didn't sound free. It sounded like it was carrying a weight that would never go away. Around noon, they heard footsteps on the path outside. Priya's heart started beating so fast she thought it might jump out of her chest. Her mother stopped stirring the pot and came to stand beside her. Her father straightened his shoulders like he was preparing for battle. The man who knocked on their door wasn't what Priya had expected. He was older, maybe 40, with rough hands and clothes that had seen better days. His eyes moved around their small house like he was calculating its worth. When he looked at Priya, she felt like an animal being inspected at the market. "So this is her?" he said, not really talking to Priya but about her. "She's bigger than you said." Priya's father looked uncomfortable. "She's a good girl. She works hard." The man walked closer to Priya, and she could smell tobacco and something else she couldn't identify. "Can she cook? Clean? Bear children?" The questions hit Priya like slaps. She wanted to speak, to say that she was more than just a set of skills and abilities. that she had thoughts and feelings and dreams. But the words stuck in her throat like stones. Yes, her father answered for her. She can do all those things. The man nodded and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small roll of dirty money. This covers the debt, right? No more, no less. Her father took the money with shaking hands. $2, the price of her entire life. Get your things. The man told Priya. We have a long walk ahead. Priya picked up her small bag, the one she had packed with her whole world inside it. Her mother hugged her so tight it hurt, whispering apologies that couldn't change anything. Her father patted her shoulder awkwardly, unable to look her in the eye. Be good, her mother said through her tears. Make us proud. Priya wanted to ask how she could make them proud of something that brought them shame. But there was no time for questions. The man was already walking toward the door. Just as they were about to leave, they heard the sound of horses coming down the road. Lots of horses moving fast. The man stopped and looked worried. Who's that? He asked. Through the window, Priya could see a group of riders approaching their house. The horses were beautiful, much finer than any she had ever seen in their village. The men riding them wore clean clothes and carried themselves like they owned the world. The lead rider dismounted and walked toward their door. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a face that looked like it smiled often. Behind him walked 2 other men, clearly his guards or assistants. I am Chief Arjun, the man announced as he approached. I'm traveling through your village on official business, and I couldn't help but notice what appears to be happening here. Priya's father looked confused and nervous. It wasn't every day that someone important visited their small village, especially not someone with the title of chief. There's no problem here, the man who had bought Priya said quickly. Just a private family matter. Chief Arjun looked at Priya, then at the money still visible in her father's hands, then back at the man beside her. His expression grew serious. A private family matter that involves a young woman being exchanged for money? He asked, his voice calm but firm. It's a marriage arrangement, Priya's father said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's legal. Legal perhaps, Chief Arjun said, but is it right? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Priya had never heard anyone ask if something could be legal but still wrong. In her world, legal and right were the same thing. You followed the rules even if the rules hurt. The man who had bought her shifted uncomfortably. Look, Chief, I paid fair and square. The girl is mine now. The girl, Chief Arjun said, emphasizing the words, is a human being with her own voice. Has anyone asked her what she wants? For the first time in 3 days, someone was talking about Priya like she mattered, like her opinion was worth something. She looked up at this stranger who had appeared like a character from one of the stories her grandmother used to tell. What's your name? Chief Arjun asked her directly. Priya, she managed to say, surprised by the sound of her own voice. Priya, he repeated like he was making sure he remembered it. Do you want to go with this man? The question was simple, but it felt like the most complicated thing anyone had ever asked her. Want didn't seem like something she was allowed to have. Want was for other people, people who had choices. She started, then stopped. Her father was looking at her with panic in his eyes. The money was already in his hands. The debt was already paid. If she said no now, what would happen to her family? It's not about what she wants, the man said impatiently. It's already decided. Nothing is decided until she says it is, Chief Arjun replied firmly. Then he turned back to Priya. You don't have to be afraid. Tell me the truth. Is this what you want for your life? Priya looked at her parents, at the man who had bought her, at the money that could save her family. Then she looked at Chief Arjun, this stranger who was treating her like a person instead of a problem to be solved. No, she whispered. Then, louder, no, this is not what I want. The man who had bought her started to argue, but Chief Arjun held up his hand to stop him. Then we have a different kind of arrangement to discuss, the chief said. He turned to Priya's father. How much do you owe? Priya's father told him the amount, which seemed huge to them but didn't even make Chief Arjun blink. I will pay your debt, Chief Arjun said. All of it, plus enough extra to help you get back on your feet. Everyone stared at him like he had just said he could make it rain money from the sky. But, he continued, looking at Priya, I have a proposition for you. If you agree, you can come with me as my wife. You would have a good home, an education, and most importantly, you would be treated with respect. Priya felt like the ground beneath her feet was shifting. This morning she had one terrible choice. Now she had another choice entirely, one that felt too good to be true. Why? She asked. Why would you do this for a stranger? Chief Arjun's expression grew sad for a moment. Because I once had a sister who faced a situation much like yours. I was too young then to help her. Now I'm not. He looked directly into her eyes. But I want to be clear about something. This offer comes with no pressure. You can say yes or you can say no. You can take time to think about it. For the first time in your life, the choice is completely yours. Priya looked at this man who had appeared out of nowhere and offered her something she had never dared to dream about. A choice. A real choice. Not between two bad things, but between an old life of pain and a new life of possibility. She looked at her parents, who were crying with relief and confusion. She looked at the man who had bought her, who was arguing with Chief Arjun's guards about getting his money back. She looked at the small house where she had spent 19 years feeling like she didn't belong. Then she looked at Chief Arjun, who was waiting patiently for her answer, treating her decision like it was the most important thing in the world. Yes, she said, surprised by how strong her voice sounded. Yes, I will come with you. And just like that, everything changed. The life she had been dreading disappeared, and a new life she couldn't even imagine began to unfold in front of her. Sometimes, Priya thought as she gathered her belongings for the second time that day, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The journey to Chief Arjun's village took 2 days on horseback. Priya had never ridden a horse before, and at first, she was terrified. But the mare she was given was gentle and patient, as if she understood that her rider was new to this world of possibilities. Chief Arjun rode beside her, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the places they passed. He didn't seem to mind that she was quiet most of the time. Priya was too overwhelmed to speak much. Everything was happening so fast, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she might wake up and find it was all a dream. When they finally reached his village, Priya's breath caught in her throat. It was 3 times bigger than her home village, with proper roads and houses that looked like they had never known hunger. There were markets full of fresh food, children playing in clean clothes, and people who looked up and smiled when they saw their chief returning. This will be your home now, Chief Arjun said as they approached a large house near the center of the village. But I want you to know something important. This marriage is real, but it doesn't have to be anything you're not ready for. Priya didn't understand what he meant until she saw her new room. It was bigger than her entire house back home, with a real bed, a window that looked out over gardens, and most amazingly, shelves full of books. This is yours, Chief Arjun said. Your private space. You can lock the door if you want. You can come and go as you please. You can eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired, and most importantly, you can say no to anything that makes you uncomfortable. Priya stared at him. In her world, wives didn't have private spaces. They didn't lock doors against their husbands. They didn't say no. I don't understand, she admitted. Chief Arjun sat down in a chair across from her, careful to keep distance between them. My sister was sold to a man when she was 16, he said quietly. He treated her terribly. She had no choice, no voice, no hope. By the time I was old enough and powerful enough to help her, she had already died from a broken heart. His eyes grew sad as he spoke. I swore that day that if I ever had the chance to prevent another woman from suffering like she did, I would take it. When I saw what was happening to you, I saw her all over again. But why marry me? Priya asked. Why not just give my father the money and let me go back home? Because going back wouldn't change anything, Chief Arjun said gently. Your family, would still be poor, other men would still come with offers, and you would still be trapped in a world that sees you as something to be sold rather than someone to be valued. He gestured around the room. Here, you can learn, you can grow, you can discover who you really are when you're not afraid all the time. That first night, Priya barely slept. She kept waiting for someone to knock on her door, to tell her it was time to fulfill her duties as a wife. But no one came. When she woke up in the morning, there was breakfast waiting outside her door and a note that said, "Eat when you're ready. I'll be in the main hall when you want to talk." Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Priya began to believe that this strange, new life was real. Chief Arjun kept his word about everything. He gave her space, treated her with kindness, and never made her feel like she owed him anything beyond basic courtesy. More importantly, he introduced her to a world she had never known existed. There was a teacher in the village, an old woman, named Devi, who had taught herself to read and write by studying with traveling merchants. Chief Arjun arranged for Priya to have lessons with her every morning. "Learning to read is like learning to fly," Devi told her on the first day. "Once you know how, you can go anywhere in your mind, even if your body has to stay in one place." Priya discovered that Devi was right. As she learned to read, whole new worlds opened up to her. She read stories about women who went on adventures, about places where the sky met the sea, about ideas that made her think in ways she never had before. In the afternoons, Chief Arjun would invite her to sit in on village meetings. At first, she just listened as he solved disputes between neighbors, made decisions about trade routes, and planned improvements for the community. But gradually, he started asking for her opinion. "What do you think about this, Priya?" he would ask when someone brought a problem to him. "You have a different perspective than the rest of us. How would you handle this?" At first, Priya was too nervous to speak. She didn't think her opinion mattered to anyone, but Chief Arjun would wait patiently until she found her voice. And when she did speak, he listened to her ideas like they were valuable. One day, a woman came to the village meeting with a problem that sounded familiar to Priya. The woman's daughter was about to be married off to pay a family debt, just like Priya had been. "This is a private family matter," some of the village elders said. "We shouldn't interfere." But Priya found herself standing up before she even realized she was going to speak. "I was in that girl's position just 3 months ago," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I know what it feels like to think your only value is what someone will pay for you. We can't let this happen to her." The room went quiet. Some people looked shocked that she had spoken so boldly. Others looked interested in what she had to say. Chief Arjun smiled at her encouragingly. "Go on, Priya. Tell us what you think we should do." So she did. She talked about creating a fund to help families in crisis so they wouldn't have to sell their daughters. She suggested teaching women skills they could use to earn money. She proposed making it illegal to arrange marriages involving minors. When she finished speaking, the room erupted in discussion. Some people loved her ideas, others thought they were too radical, but everyone was listening, and everyone was taking her seriously. That night, as Priya sat in her room reading by candlelight, Chief Arjun knocked on her door. "I wanted to thank you," he said when she opened it. "What you said today was brave and important." "I was terrified," Priya admitted. "I thought people would laugh at me." "They didn't laugh because what you said made sense," Chief Arjun replied. "You have wisdom that comes from experience. That's worth more than all the books in the world." As the months passed, Priya found herself changing in ways she had never expected. She walked taller. She spoke louder. She laughed more. The girl, who had once felt worthless, was discovering that she had value beyond anything she had ever imagined. But the biggest change was in how she saw Chief Arjun. He wasn't just her rescuer anymore. He was becoming her friend, her partner, her equal. She began to look forward to their conversations, to the way he asked her opinion about important matters, to the respect he showed her ideas. One evening, as they sat together planning a new program to help young women in the village, Priya realized something that surprised her. She was happy, not just grateful or relieved, but genuinely happy. Can I ask you something? She said to Chief Arjun. Of course. When you married me, did you think I would ever be this? Someone who speaks up in meetings and has ideas about changing the world? Chief Arjun considered her question carefully. I didn't know exactly who you would become, he said finally. But I knew you were someone worth believing in. All you needed was the chance to believe in yourself. That night, for the first time since arriving at her new home, Priya looked in the mirror and liked what she saw. Not because she looked different, but because she felt different. She felt valuable. She felt worthy. She felt like someone who mattered, and for the first time in her life she began to wonder if maybe someday she might even feel loved. 6 months had passed since Priya arrived in her new home, and the change in her was remarkable. The quiet, frightened girl who had once believed she was worthless had grown into a confident woman who spoke her mind and fought for what was right. Her reading lessons with Devi had progressed so well that she was now helping teach other women in the village. Every week, a small group would gather in the main hall, and Priya would help them learn their letters and numbers. Watching these women discover the same joy of learning that she had experienced filled her with a purpose she had never known before. But it was her work with young women in crisis that had really made her name known throughout the region. Word had spread about the village that didn't allow girls to be sold into marriage, and families from far and wide were bringing their daughters to safety. Priya had helped create what they called the Safe Harbor Program. When a family was in desperate financial trouble, instead of selling their daughter, they could come to the village for help. The community would provide work for the parents, education for the children, and most importantly, protection for any young women who might otherwise be forced into unwanted marriages. Chief Arjun supported every aspect of the program, but he made sure everyone knew it was Priya's vision that made it possible. This village is becoming a beacon of hope because of her wisdom and compassion, he would tell visitors. The more Priya accomplished, the more confident she became. But with that confidence came something she hadn't expected, a growing awareness of her feelings for Chief Arjun. It wasn't that she hadn't noticed his kindness before. From the very first day, he had been nothing but respectful and caring. But somewhere along the way, her gratitude had begun to transform into something deeper. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations more than anything else in her day. When he smiled at one of her ideas or praised her work, with the other women, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with genuine affection. The problem was, she didn't know if he felt the same way. He had married her to save her, not because he loved her. He treated her well because he was a good man, not because she was special to him. At least that's what she told herself. One evening, as they were reviewing plans for expanding the Safe Harbor program to other villages, Chief Arjun seemed unusually quiet. Is something wrong? Priya asked. He hesitated before answering. I've been thinking about something and I'm not sure how to bring it up. Priya felt her heart start to race. Had she overstepped somehow? Was he tired of having her around? Had she become too bold, too outspoken? What is it? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. It's been 6 months since you came here, he said carefully. 6 months since we were married, but we've never really talked about what that means. Priya's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She had been so focused on learning and growing and helping others that she had almost forgotten they were supposedly husband and wife. In truth, they lived more like friends sharing a house than a married couple. I want you to know, Chief Arjun continued, that I have no expectations. This arrangement was about giving you freedom, not taking it away. If you want to stay married in name only, that's perfectly fine. If you want to annul the marriage and live independently, I'll support that too. Priya stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. He was giving her another choice, just like he had that first day. The choice to stay or go, to remain, married or not, to continue as they were or change everything. What do you want? She asked quietly. Chief Arjun looked surprised by the question. What I want doesn't matter. This is about what you want. But it does matter, Priya insisted. Your feelings matter too. What do you want from this marriage? Chief Arjun was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the village they both cared so much about. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and uncertain. "I want you to be happy," he said. "That's all I've ever wanted. When I first saw you that day, you looked like someone who had never been happy in her entire life. Now you laugh and smile and argue with me about village policies." He smiled slightly. "You've become the person you were always meant to be." "That's not an answer," Priya said gently. "That's what you want for me. What do you want for yourself?" Chief Arjun turned to look at her then, and she saw something in his eyes she had never noticed before, something that looked like longing. "If I'm being completely honest," he said slowly, "I want to earn your love. Not because you're grateful to me or because you feel obligated, but because you choose to love me the same way you chose to come here in the first place." Priya felt her heart stop and start again. "You want me to love you?" "I want the chance to court you properly," Chief Arjun said, his cheeks reddening slightly. "To show you that what I feel for you isn't just protective or charitable. I want to win your heart the way any man would want to win the heart of a woman he admires." "You admire me?" Priya asked, hardly believing what she was hearing. "How could I not?" Chief Arjun said, his voice growing stronger. "You've transformed this entire village with your ideas and your compassion. You've helped dozens of women find safety and hope. You've become a leader that people look up to. But more than that, you've become someone I look forward to seeing every day, someone whose opinion I value above all others, someone who makes me want to be a better leader and a better man." Priya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of joy mixed with disbelief. "I thought you only married me out of pity," she whispered. "It started that way," Chief Arjun admitted. "I saw someone who needed help and I had the power to help. But it became something much more than that almost immediately. Watching you discover your own strength, seeing you fight for others, listening to your ideas. Somewhere along the way I realized I wasn't just protecting you anymore. I was falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "I don't know how to be loved," Priya said finally. "I don't know if I'm good at it." "Neither do I," Chief Arjun replied with a gentle smile. "I've been so focused on being a leader that I never learned how to be a husband. We could learn together if you want." Priya looked at this man who had given her everything: freedom, education, purpose, respect, and was now offering her something she had never dared to hope for: the chance to be loved for who she really was. "I think I would like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Chief Arjun's face lit up with a smile that was brighter than any she had ever seen. "Then we can take it slow," he said. "We can get to know each other not as rescuer and rescued, but as two people who might possibly be falling in love." That night, as Priya sat in her room, their room she realized if she wanted it to be, she thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been a girl who thought she was worth $2. Now she was a woman who had discovered she was priceless, and tomorrow she would begin a new adventure, learning how to love and be loved in return. 2 years had passed since that evening when Chief Arjun and Priya decided to open their hearts to each other. What followed was the most beautiful courtship anyone in the village had ever seen. They took walks together through the village, talking about everything and nothing. They shared meals where they debated village policies and dreamed about the future. Chief Arjun brought Priya small gifts, not expensive things, but thoughtful ones. A book he thought she'd enjoy, a flower he picked on his way to a meeting, a sweet treat from the market that he remembered her mentioning she'd never tried. More importantly, they worked together as true partners. When difficult decisions needed to be made for the village, they discussed them as equals. When new families arrived seeking help, they welcomed them together. When challenges arose, they faced them side by side. The night Priya finally felt ready to become Chief Arjun's wife in every way was one she would remember forever. It wasn't because anyone expected it or because she felt obligated. It was because she loved him completely and knew without doubt that he loved her the same way. Their wedding ceremony, the real one, not the legal arrangement that had brought them together, was celebrated by the entire village. Everyone who had watched Priya transform from a frightened girl into a confident leader wanted to be part of her joy. But their personal happiness was only part of the story. The Safe Harbor program had grown beyond anything they had originally imagined. What had started as a way to help one village's girls had become a movement that was changing the entire region. Priya now traveled to other villages, training local women to start their own programs. She had written a simple guide explaining how communities could create economic opportunities for struggling families, how to educate young women about their rights, and how to build support networks that prevented desperate families from making desperate choices. The guide was copied and shared from village to village. Priya couldn't have imagined when she first learned to read that someday, her own words would be teaching others across the land. Chief Arjun had used his political influence to make their changes official. He worked with other regional leaders to create laws that made it illegal to sell children into marriage. He established funds that provided emergency help to families in crisis. Most importantly, he used his position to spread the message that every person, regardless of their appearance or family situation, had inherent worth and dignity. But the change they were most proud of was happening right in their own village. Young women who might once have been considered unmarriageable were now learning trades, becoming teachers, starting businesses of their own. Girls who would have been sold to pay debts were instead going to school and dreaming of futures they could create for themselves. One day, a familiar face appeared at their door. It was Kamala, Priya's mother, looking older and more weathered than when Priya had last seen her 3 years ago. "I came to see if the stories were true," she said, tears streaming down her face. "They say my daughter has become a leader, that she's helping women across the region." Priya hugged her mother tightly, forgiveness flowing between them without need for words. "Come see for yourself," she said. For a week, Kamala stayed in the village, watching in amazement as her daughter led meetings, taught reading classes, and welcomed new families seeking help. She saw how the entire community looked to Priya for guidance and how Chief Arjun treated her as an equal partner in everything they did. "I used to think we ruined your life," Kamala said on her last evening there. "I thought we took away your chance at happiness." "You gave me the greatest gift possible," Priya replied. "You taught me that even in the darkest moments things can change, that even when you feel worthless, you might be worth more than you can imagine." "How can you forgive us?" Kamala asked. "How can you forgive me for agreeing to sell you?" Priya took her mother's hands in hers. "Because your desperate choice led to my greatest blessing. Because your mistake became my miracle, and because holding on to anger would only hurt both of us." When Kamala left, she carried with her not just forgiveness, but pride. Her daughter, the girl she had once thought was unmarriageable, had become someone who was changing the world. Years continued to pass, and Priya's influence grew even wider. She and Chief Arjun had 3 children together, 2 daughters and a son, who grew up understanding that their mother had once been considered worthless, but had proven that worth comes from within, not from what others think of you. There, daughters learned to read and write, to speak up for themselves, to dream big dreams and work hard to achieve them. Their son learned to treat all people with respect, to use his privileges to help others, and to value people for their character rather than their appearance or circumstances. The Safe Harbor program had spread to over 50 villages by the time Priya turned 30. Thousands of young women had been saved from unwanted marriages. Hundreds of families had been lifted out of desperation. The culture itself was changing, slowly but surely. One evening, as Priya and Chief Arjun sat watching their children play in the garden, he asked her a question that made her think. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come through your village that day?" Priya considered the question seriously. "I used to wonder about that a lot," she said. "But now I think I was always meant to do this work. Maybe it would have happened differently. Maybe it would have taken longer, but I think I was always meant to help other women find their worth. Even if you had gone with that other man?" "Even then," Priya said with certainty. "Pain has a way of creating compassion. Struggle has a way of building strength. Even in the worst circumstances, I think I would have found a way to help others, because that's who I really am inside." Chief Arjun smiled and took her hand. I'm glad we'll never have to find out. I'm glad I got to be part of your story instead of just hearing about it from far away." As the sun set over their village, Priya reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a girl who thought she was worth $2 and had become a woman whose influence was priceless. But the real measure of her success wasn't in the program she had created or the laws that had been changed, or even the hundreds of women she had personally helped. The real measure was in the little girl playing in their garden, their youngest daughter who would grow up never questioning her own worth, never wondering if she was valuable, never fearing that someone might try to sell her future. That little girl would grow up free in ways Priya could only dream of when she was that age. And someday, that little girl would help other little girls stay free too. The cycle of worth, Priya realized, was the most beautiful cycle of all. When you discover your own value, you can't help but see the value in others. When you fight for your own dignity, you end up fighting for everyone's dignity. When you refuse to let your story end in darkness, you light the way for others to find their own light. Priya's story had started with $2 and a broken heart, but it had become something much more valuable than money could measure. A legacy of hope that would last long after she was gone, carried forward by all the women she had helped and all the children those women would raise to know their own worth from the very beginning. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the darkest moments. Sometimes what looks like the end is actually just the beginning. And sometimes discovering your own value is the first step toward showing the whole world what real worth looks like.